All right, everyone. I've got to warn any of you that are looking to romance or even just recruit Halsin for your party that this beefy man really plays hard to get. So it's a good thing that I'm here to help you out with locking him down. I'm going to say I had a lot of trouble finding any guides on how to romance him that weren't just horribly riddled with spoilers. So I'm going to do you all a solid and offer both here. Yes, I'm going to do a spoiler-free guide at the very beginning, and then I'm going to go over the whole thing in depth for those who want a little more hand-holding and to know what I thought about the quest along the way. Might I also add that I haven't forgotten about my dear Gale. There's just a lot of waiting and gating involved with him, and only so much time in a day to make content and play the game. So, after the camp celebration, you might be wondering, how the heck do I romance Halsin, and how do I get him as a party member? I know I was. And to be clear, this isn't technically a part of the romance, but it's 100% required in order to get to his romance. So it's necessary to list it as a part of the process. So that's what we're doing here. Now let's get started. This is going to be the spoiler-free version, or at least I'm going to do my best to tell you where to go without ruining anything. In order to proceed with Halsin, you have to head into the Shadow-Cursed lands. Once there, you'll be kept pretty busy with the main story, but when you go to your camp again, talk to Halsin. And you should notice that he now has an option to speak to him about looking for someone. Now, I am going to have to use the names of locations here simply because I need to be able to tell you where to go, and I can't just say, go to that place over there. So I'm also going to show you on the map so that you know where to go, but I'm going to try and blur everything else out, so only the important stuff is visible. So if you simply follow the main story, once you enter the zone, you will end up at a place called Last Light Inn, where you will find the person Halsin is looking for. Go back to camp afterwards and tell Halsin, and he will respond accordingly by visiting that person at the inn, and then you'll be left wondering what to do next. You'll find what you're looking for at a place called the House of Healing. The House of Healing is right here, and that's all I'm going to tell you, is that there is an item you need to get there, and you need to bring it back. But the rest of the quest line from that point on is pretty straightforward, so if you don't want any spoilers, that should be enough to get you through to the point where you can recruit Halsin. So good luck, and I hope I didn't spoil anything. I was trying my best, but it's really hard not to do. Now, for those who want a more detailed guide and to hear everything I had to say about the whole experience, keep watching. So once again, as soon as you enter the Shadow-Cursed lands, you can head to camp and find a new dialogue option from Halsin. When you ask about how to lift the Shadow Curse, he'll tell you that he needs to find Thaniel, a Fey child, who is basically the spirit of the land. He says to let him know if you find any hint about someone who might have been a witness to what happened to Thaniel because he is missing. So leave camp and continue with the main story until you make it to Last Light Inn. Inside the inn, in a room to the right where all the flaming fists are meeting, you'll find a man laying in bed. Interact with him and you'll notice really quickly that he's singing a song about someone named Thaniel, the very same boy our dear Daddy Halsin has sent us to find. Offer to have a look at him when given the chance and pass some easy checks to get more details. In my case, I went with Arcana and found that the man had spent a long time in the Shadowfell. It suggests that something physical, something he held dear in real life, might help his mind to come back to his body and leave the darkness. If you ask if he has any personal effects, the fist by his bedside will give you an order she found in his pocket. If you further investigate, you'll also find that his fingertips have calluses, like someone who might have done a lot of manual labor or played an instrument. Next, I checked the paper, which is basically like a work order of sorts, stating what Art's last assignment was. He was to investigate the House of Healing. With this newfound information, head back to camp and tell Halsin what you found. He'll want to immediately head to the Last Light Inn and will ask you to join him when you can. Head back and talk to Halsin, who will just be walking in the door as you arrive. He'll reiterate that you need to find something to bring Art's mind back from the Shadowfell, and the most likely place to find that personal effect we're all looking for is going to be where this happened to him in the first place, the House of Healing. Now, the House of Healing isn't too far away, but you will have to follow the main story a touch more to make sure you're protected against the greater shadow curse. I'm pretty sure there is a really thick spot that you will need protection in order to pass through. So here's a map showing you how to get to the House of Healing for when you're ready. You may run into a couple fights along the way, but it shouldn't be anything too difficult. Once inside, there will be a nurse named Sister Seeda that you will have to convince to let you in to see the doctor. You can do it a few different ways, but I pretended to be an expert sent to help the doctor. You can also pretend to be really sick to try and talk your way in as well. So head on in and find the doctor in the large main room, which you'll soon find is an operating theater. And all I've got to say is, wow, just wow. This whole scene, the environment, the characters was amazing, and I am completely in love with it. The doctor is quite obviously a bit deranged and invested in the ways of torture. Even Astarion, if you pick one option, will come right out and say that he's insane as Cazador was.
He's just like Cazador. Utterly insane.
Which was kind of awesome. And he has several of these sisters looking on as he demonstrates some crazy nonsense. But the visuals and the sound, like the music, everything is amazing here. It's just top notch. Now, obviously, I'm not going to tell you how to play your game, but if you choose to fight this guy, he is pretty beefy. I think he had close to 300 hit points. And then figure there are all the nurses there too, and I don't want to end up in the middle of a Silent Hill game. No! And in my own humble and disturbed opinion, I feel that using their twisted logic against them is much more satisfying. So when you're given the chance to talk to him, just be civil. Say you want to be enlightened. Then persuade him that the sisters might hurt you instead of curing you because they're so inexperienced. This is a moderately difficult role, but you should be able to manage it, especially if you have some inspiration. But you're not done yet. How indeed should we show these nurses how to steady their hands? Well, in my case, I used wizard persuasion and told him to volunteer to be an example, which was absolutely amazing. I don't know if you can do this as other classes, but I certainly hope you can. It's a tough roll that needs 21 to pass, but you'll also have advantage, and it will end the fight before it even begins, and you'll be able to walk away without so much as a spent spell slot. You can also choose to persuade him to have the sisters hone their skills on each other, which is quite amusing as well. It still takes rolling a 21 though, and you're still left dealing with the doctor, but at least it will be a much easier fight now without all the nurses. There was another deception option for me though as a wizard, which became an option after the nurses were dealt with. It's another 21 roll, so if you have the choice, it makes more sense to just go with the first class-based option to have the nurses take care of killing the doctor. It is really amazing though, the extent of what Larian's allowed us to do here. All of the choices, it's awesome. I still like the option when the nurses killed him the best because it's just so wow. It's messed up and it just creates such an intense atmosphere. Also, I've got to say, this whole place was awesome. I came here thirsting after Halsin and ended up really enjoying how dark and crazy it all was. It reminded me so much of Silent Hill with the freaky nurses, and even remembering in Homecoming how you woke up in a hospital and there was even a medical theater there too. I loved the grit though and felt taken back to that dark fantasy vibe that I loved so much from Dragon Age Origins. Whew, I do love this game. Okay, let's get back on topic though. However you manage to kill Malus, or Malus, I have no idea how to say that. We'll say Malus, because that sounds more probable. However you manage to kill Malus Thorm, make sure you loot him and take the loot he has. Loot the loot, get it? You'll notice the initials AC are inscribed into the wood. So is this what we were looking for to hopefully bring Art's mind out of the Shadowfell? Sure hope so. Actually, it is. So head back to the Last Light Inn and talk to Art again. There will be a new option now mentioning that you found his lute, and then you can play it for him. After a few strummed notes, Art wakes up yelling about how Thaniel is still trapped in there. Halsin is desperate to know how he might find Thaniel, but Art has trouble describing it considering that Shadowfell changes so much. Eventually, he tells Halsin that the smell of lavender always accompanied Thaniel, and Halsin seems to think that's enough for him to work with. Next, Halsin will ask you to follow him to the lake out back, and then we'll hit off the next part of this quest. Now, I want you guys to get a nice, hard look at these rocks, because you're going to be looking at them for the next hour or so as you try to finish this quest. It's hard, incredibly hard. Before you talk to Halsin, you're going to need to prepare with characters who have AoE crowd control. I honestly don't know how you could do this without a dedicated spellcaster. I had 2 wizards in my party and still had trouble because it's just that insanely difficult. A must-have for this fight is Hypnotic Pattern, and Stinking Cloud is also pretty good too. I would also suggest making a hard save first, because winning this battle might come down to luck at some points in just rolling better than your enemies. Might I also suggest Glyph of Warding? It can also be really useful here. I've also found, since finishing this quest, that Wall of Fire would probably have trivialized this fight a lot, but I didn't have it when I actually did the quest. Once you're ready, talk to Halsin to start the encounter. I really wanted to be able to go in and help him, but he's pretty adamant that only he can do this, and it works out because every shadow creature in the zone comes out of the woodwork to attack the portal and stop him from saving Thaniel. Once Halsin enters the portal, you must keep it from being destroyed at any cost, or else Halsin will die. In my case, I was running with Gale, Astarion, and Lae'zel. I had Astarion and Lae'zel stay at the base of the rocks and kill anything that came close. You mainly want to make sure they stay out of any AoE your casters are going to set off too, especially if you don't have an evoker. So then I had Gale and my wizard Tav stay up higher and run interference. Enemies are going to pour out of everywhere to try and destroy this portal. It's going to be more than you could possibly expect, and you might find yourself panicking a little bit if you're anything like me. I couldn't kill them quick enough, and you really only have about 3 rounds, or at least that's what it says, but it ends up being a little bit more than 3 rounds, I think. But I was able to slow them down. Every time a huge group was gathered, I used Hypnotic Pattern to stop them in their tracks, and Stinking Cloud to halt the rest. Glyph of Warding can also work really well here, especially Detonation, the one that repels the enemies back when hit. The big problem with all of these spells, though, is that it requires concentration, so anything that can keep your caster from being hit is great in this situation too. If you have the feat Warcaster, you will be golden. Then use your melee protectors to finish off anything that gets past. Use Astarion's offhand. Well, I'm assuming that he's a thief, but mine's a thief. And I just used his offhand, which I can use extra because he's a thief. And I used that offhand to get as many attacks as I could. And it is enough to kill the ravens because they only have 1 HP. And the creepers, I think, only have 8 HP, but you can crit quite easily on them. And then there's also these pilgrims that only have 1 HP. So it's really good to use as many of his attacks as possible to kill as many as possible. So there's not all that damage hitting the portal. And Lae'zel too, you can use Action Surge and hit things. I usually use her to take care of the shadows because there will be a really high HP shadow running around hitting everybody. And there's also a bunch of lower HP shadows as well. And she's good for taking them out. It's going to get crazy, but so long as you can keep the portal from being destroyed, you will come out victorious. Do not be afraid to make some quick saves when you're doing well, just in case. When Halsin is finally finished, he will come out and destroy all the remaining enemies, which, I tell you what, was a huge relief to me. But all is not well because it seems there's something very wrong with Thaniel. Oh god, do you know what just happened? Do you remember that stupid song from The Witcher? All is not as it seems. It just popped into my freaking head. I hate that song so much. Anyway, Halsin says it's like something is missing from him. Just try to keep Halsin's spirits up. tell him to take Thaniel back to camp in order to continue on. But I tell you what, how about all those enemies? My goodness! You can loot them all too if you wish, but there wasn't anything really good on them. At least not from what I found, unless I missed something in there. So head back to camp to check up on both Halsin and Thaniel. And Halsin will tell you that he's found out what's wrong with the boy, that the shadows rendered him in two, with half being brought to the Shadowfell and the other half remaining behind with the shadow curse. So the next part of the quest is to find that other part of Thaniel. And just as I was ready to go on my merry way, doing more legwork for Daddy Halsin's love, he shocked me with this absolute gem of a line. You guys gotta hear it.
This doesn't have to be your burden alone. Every moment counts, and I've asked much of you already without being at your side. If you want me, I'm yours. Against the curse, against the absolute. Anything. Just say the word. Good. Now our roots can deepen. Together.
Oh my God, guys. I mean, damn. I know he doesn't necessarily mean this as a romantic companion when he says it, but if you're thinking of him as one, whew, it's just that much better. Imagining me and Halsin against the world, he actually makes me believe we can do it, you know? Of course, I got him in my party as fast as humanly possible. For the sake of recording, I got rid of Lae'zel first to be prepared, but the first time I did this, I had to run back and get rid of her. I was like, sorry girl, I need a harem. I'm sure she understands. So at this point, Halsin can join your party, which is what we've been working for. It took me a while basically getting all his levels taken care of and finding the most suitable gear for him. I made him a Druid of the Moon because it just felt appropriate, and he's going to be my new massively looming Druid friend, and hopefully a lot more than that soon. I will say that there is also a ton of dialogue that you get with him once he's recruited, and Halsin is so much funnier than I thought he would be, and his camp clothes are so good. It's just big, huge buff shoulders, arms, and chest, and I'm totally digging it. But I'll have to save all the new flirty dialogue for the next video because this one was already way too long. I wanted to put this together though, so that people who weren't sure what to do or where to go for progressing their Halsin-mance would have some guidance. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, as there is going to be a huge slew of new BG3 content coming out over the next few months, possibly years. I mean, there's a lot. Thanks to my Patreons for the support, and if you'd like to help support the channel too and get access to the private Discord and a whole other chunk of content on Patreon, then head over and make a pledge. I'll see you guys later.